Welcome to record keeping with a focus on arrival and departure records and the impact that they have on attendance tracking. My name is Heather Young. I'm with CAPS Provider Relations, Education and Outreach. The first thing we want to do is break down the fundamentals of what is required when it comes to arrival and departure records. The provider must keep arrival and departure records as well as classroom attendance records that are properly dated and include the times in and out. Providers also need to make sure the child's name that's listed on the scholarship matches the name that's listed on the arrival and departure records. If there are any discrepancies with the information that's on the scholarship, the parent needs to request a change via the case manager or gateway. So who can sign the child in and out? Per CAPS policy 12.4.8.10, we can accept the parent's or authorized representative's original or electronic signature. The form you see on the slide is an example of a daily attendance form. This can be used to sign children in and out daily. Let's look at an example of an acceptable arrival and departure record. Notice there is a section for the parent to sign the child in and list the time next to the date, and then another section for the parent to sign the child out with the date and time listed as well. Also, the signature is legible. It has the parent's first and last name, and it is signed consistently, meaning that the signature looks the same each time. Also, we do want to clarify that parents' initials are allowed, but if the parent signs their full name, it does make for easier verification. The child should be signed in at the time of drop-off and signed out at pickup. This should not be done at the end of the week, not at the end of the month, and not when audits asks for the records. That would be fraudulent activity in which the record could be altered later to match billing. Later in the presentation, we will look at some ideas on ways to ensure that parents are signing their children in and out. Providers should not sign children in and out. Parents must do this. Providers signing children in and out for any reason to get paid can be indicative of fraudulent activity. Parents need to sign the child in, and their signature should be the same as what is listed on the scholarship if possible, and it should be legible and consistent, meaning that the signature, whether the full name or the initials, should look the same each time, as we showed in the example before. Let's talk about manual records versus electronic records. Electronic, meaning that the parent uses a computer or tablet to sign the child in. Providers should know that it must have the same element on both types of records. Parents should have a unique code that is only known to them, and they should not share it with a provider because it could be used to sign the child in and out even when the child does not attend. So here is the way this would work as a hypothetical. The parent would have a unique code known only to them. They would input this code to sign into the arrival and departure record. Once the parent is signed in, the parent will see the date and check the child in. The computer will log the time and identify the parent by the unique sign-in code. So even with an electronic version, we would still get the date, the time, and the parent's unique signature. This would be repeated, of course, when signing the child out. Our policy does allow electronic signatures. We do accept ProCare and a few other platforms for electronic records. Each parent or authorized pickup must have their own individual unique code. This could be a PIN code or even a QR code. This is to be used when the parent or the authorized representative picks the child up and drops the child off. We do want to also point out that if providers submit the electronic record to us for review, they must give us the back end of the report. Meaning, instead of showing us code 1234 signed in and out, we must see that code 1234 is assigned to Jane Doe with the timestamp for pickup and drop off. If a provider is unfamiliar with how to extract that report, they must work with ProCare or their electronic vendor, whoever that may be, to obtain the back office report that shows names of the person and not the code. So what happens if there are technical issues and the electronic sign-in and out isn't working? If it's not working for the day or for any period, the electronic system may have a provision in place where providers can print out their roster and have parents or authorized representatives manually sign in and out and input the time of pickup and drop-off. If providers are unaware on how to do this, then providers would need to establish a manual system for those technically challenged times. When a parent signs the child in and out, the signature must be the parent's first and last name as it appears on the scholarship or their initials, and it must be legible and signed the same way each time. If it isn't, additional verification will be needed before a request can be approved for payment. If the attendance can't be verified, then the provider's attendance records may be rejected. Parents must sign their name, not mom, dad, grandmother, and so forth. So let's look at the error with this submission. As you can see, instead of signing her name, the parent simply signed mom. This is unacceptable and would be rejected as attendance verification. Make sure the name listed on the scholarship matches the name that's listed on the arrival and departure records. As we mentioned earlier, if there are any discrepancies with the information on the scholarship, then the parent needs to request a change via their case manager or gateway. Just as the parent signature on arrival and departure and attendance records must match the name on the scholarship, the child's name on the scholarship should match the name on the arrival and departure and attendance records as well. We cannot recognize children by nicknames, and this can cause an overpayment. The claim can be reconsidered, but proof of the name must be supplied. By policy, records should be kept for 3 years from the last date the service is provided. Only A&D and attendance records are accepted for attendance verification. However, in some cases, transportation records are accepted. No other records will be accepted, such as nutrition or parent affidavit. It should be emphasized that many providers want us to take the word of the parent, but this does not meet the policy, and it isn't a good way to prove attendance. If the parent is present at either arrival or departure, then the parent will sign the child in and out. If the parent is not present to sign at both arrival and departure, then transportation records can be used. The transportation agreement is completed and signed by the parent. The passenger transportation checklist includes the children that are on the transportation schedule and signatures of the responsible party for each day that children are transported. So attendance record summary. Keep correct arrival and departure records for every day a child is in care. The records should report who dropped off and picked up the child each day they attended. Daycare staff may not sign children in and out. And transportation agreements and logs support, but they do not replace arrival and departure records. Records may be requested by decal, and they are due 15 calendar days from the date that the notice is received. Failure to supply them causes a complete overpayment. So, if a provider receives a notice requesting the records, then the provider has 15 calendar days from the date the notice is received to supply them, or it will result in a complete overpayment. Arrival and departure records and transportation records must be kept on site, as we said, for at least 3 years. But they may be required to be kept beyond 3 years if there is an investigation. Again, it must be the originals on site that are signed by the parent and signed in and out. If it is electronic, the parent must have a unique signature known only to them, and the only exception to this is if the parent is not present to sign, in which case transportation records are used. It should also be noted that if the director cannot be present at the time of a review, then the director must select an alternate person to access those records. The records must be available. Records requested by DECAL must be submitted within the 15-day timeline, and failure to provide required documentation may result in a reimbursement, dismissal, or prevent the provider from participating in other DECAL programs. Now we want to show an example of when providers would need to submit A&D records. The first way is submitting to provider relations because of a payment request. In the Georgia CAPS provider portal, one of the options on the dashboard allows for providers to request a payment adjustment or correction. As you can see on the dropdown, some possible reasons for this being requested is if a provider has marked no care in error, or if there are unbilled service weeks between 60 and 90 days that need to be submitted, and so on. For these requests to be considered, we need to have verification of attendance, and the arrival and departure records will have to be submitted. If we can't verify because of inaccurately executed records, this can cause us to have to reach out to both providers and families for verification. And if we can't get that verification another way, it will be rejected. If we can verify, we will pay, but obviously these extra steps take time, causing a delay in payment. Another example of when these records would be submitted is if there is a request from DECAL. The records should be properly dated, month, day, and year, and submitted to DECAL upon request in an orderly manner. Failure to do so can cause a complete overpayment per the policy. Providers should only send in copies of records, not originals, which should be retained in the center per CCS rules. According to Audits and Compliance, this is a big one. No matter how many times it has been said or put into writing for providers, there are still some providers who will still send in their original records, and this violates their license. The CPA talks about where records should be housed and how they should be available to audits upon request. Another situation where records may need to be submitted is if Audits and Compliance requests them. Audits can walk into a center and request them, and the center can receive an overpayment if they do not have them available. If a provider moves records to another place for storage besides what is on the CPA, DECAL must be notified within 5 business days, and they should then sign a new CPA. We mentioned previously that all original records should be kept on site for a minimum of 3 years and must be made available upon request from DECAL. Some examples of proper storage for records include a locked cabinet or a locked filing cabinet. The storage should be in a secure location with limited access. In some circumstances, off-site storage may be allowed, but it must be approved by DECAL, and it must be kept where it can be accessed quickly and easily because these records must be made available upon request, including at on-site visits. Now, I just want to give a quick summary or review of what we learned about arrival and departure records. And we just want to emphasize the importance of the accuracy of these records because it can really slow down the process of a provider receiving a payment or even cause a denial when we don't have proper verification. These records are one of the biggest areas of errors, and we want to correct that because we are your advocates. We want you to be paid. We don't want errors that are easy to fix to be the reason that your payment, adjustment, or correction request gets denied. So we want to review again what is acceptable verification and what is not. When a parent signs the child in and out, the signature must be the parent's name as it appears on the scholarship, and it must be legible and signed the same way each time. If it isn't, the provider's attendance records may be rejected, causing an overpayment. So encourage them to sign their first and last name, but we will accept the initials. So just to review, this is an example of what an A&D record should look like. It has the date and the time that the child is signed in and out. The parent's signature reflects what is listed on the scholarship. It is legible and it is consistent. It looks the same each time. This is an example of an A&D record that would be rejected. You can see that the parent's name is not legible and cannot be identified in any way. Even the scribble isn't consistent. There is no way to identify who this is by these markings. In this case, there are several issues. You can see there's no first and last name or initials for a signature. Staff has also signed in and out on different occasions. This would need further verification. One other thing that we do want to mention, exempt providers need to know when they can and cannot bill. CAPS only pays under 2 exempt categories, exempt category 1 and 7. So examples of a category 1 would be after-school programs. An example of category 7 would be day camps and YMCAs. This means that a provider can still be an exempt provider with another category, but the provider is not entitled to payment even if there is a scholarship. The existence of a scholarship does not give the provider the right to bill. So how do providers communicate all of this to families? You can schedule mandatory parent orientations for existing and new families where you go over your policies and procedures. Parents need to sign documentation that they have read and understand the procedures and that they will follow them. You can post instructions at all entry and exit locations and be sure to enforce your procedures by being consistent in your routine. Put a plan in place and then enforce it. Communicate the importance of calm transitioning for children and the need to do it safely. These orientations don't have to be long, but they need to be clear on what the procedures are for dropping off and picking up. You can emphasize that these are procedures that help ensure the safety of all children, and they are requirements to attend your center. You can also emphasize that it is part of CAPS policies and it will be enforced at any center that accepts CAPS families. So how do providers incorporate a plan to set the expectation with families so that they comply? Well, you can use a simple arrival and departure record to engage with families. The sign-in out sheet can be used as a tool to engage and greet one another. Teachers can be the point of contact, and this can create a bond between the teachers and the families they serve. You use the process to emphasize the importance of health and safety in all your practices. The transition for children from their families to staff is important, and it needs to be done in a gentle and safe way. This creates security for children and ensures that they are being delivered into your care safely and efficiently. This also ensures that every child is accounted for in a uniform, organized, and responsible fashion. You want your reputation as a center to be one that is organized and efficient, not chaotic or careless when it comes to children being placed in your care or when leaving your care. Use this process as a way of engaging with families and building a relationship of trust. The ideas that are listed on the slide are just a few ideas to get you thinking. Of course, you may need to adjust these ideas for your specific situation. But honestly, procedures for children being dropped off and picked up should be a priority in any center. And we can look briefly at these quick ideas. The first one states to have a staff member that is posted at the entrance to oversee parents signing the children in and out of care. The next idea is to have families take children directly to the classroom, and the procedure includes greeting the teacher by signing the child in and out, or the teacher or the assistant can be used in this example, and they would be overseeing that sign in and out process. Another way is to have a central location where all children are transitioned over to a staff member, and the process includes being greeted as children are signed in and out. So how can providers ensure that children are being signed in and out correctly each day? Include requirements for dropping off and picking up in your policies. Create an environment that requires children to be delivered to a staff member that will collect the signatures. Post instructions at all entrances and exits. Explain that all CAPS families must adhere to these rules if they want to be a part of the program. Remember, you are business owners and you set the tone for how your business day runs. If parents are trying to drop and run, explain that to ensure the safety of all children, this behavior is unacceptable. They must deliver the child to a staff member where they will sign them in and out each day, no exceptions. There are 5 factors that have been identified that strengthen families and also help prevent child abuse. Number 1, social and emotional competence of children. Parents understanding the importance of children being nurtured and developing a positive relationship with a caring adult. Number 2, parental resilience, the ability to bounce back if times are challenging. Number 3, parental knowledge of child development and parenting skills. Knowing what is typical developmentally for each age and stage of development in children and positive parenting. Number 4, concrete support in times of need. Knowing what resources exist in your community when difficult times arise and how to access those resources. Number 5, social connections, having friends and someone to call. So building relationships with families can help them thrive by meeting more than one of these important factors. So when you greet families and you engage in conversation, you're helping to support the families and the children in your care. Also, parents will be more likely to listen if you have a concern if they have a relationship that's already established with you. So the last thing that we're going to look at is the records that need to be kept on site. So you must keep CAPS records for at least 3 years after the month of the last day of service. You must get approval before you store records off-site. You may be interviewed by an investigator from the DECAL Audits and Compliance Division on billing or payment errors. As a state-approved provider, you must cooperate with any investigation. So these are the documents that need to be on site. Your arrival and departure records with parent signature or authorized signature. Transportation records, such as logs and agreements. Copies of child care license or a letter of exemption. Copies of business license and certificate of occupancy. Financial records or financial information, such as bank statements or copies of canceled checks. Current published policies and procedures, and current published rate sheets. Also, digitized Civil Rights Act compliance form, verification of Social Security number and FEIN tax ID numbers, employment records, records supporting funding from other state or federal sources, and child records such as birth certificates, immunization forms, and registration information. And then any and all information or records related to the operation of the provider. The documents that are listed here may be requested and reviewed during attendance verification assessments, during compliance reviews, or investigations. And you can refer to CAPS Program Integrity Policy for more information on assessments, reviews, investigations, and sanctions. We hope that you found this presentation both informative and helpful, and we thank you for watching.